Something was needed to sop up the sauce with the little red specks when the chicken was served. Rice! The spilled cereal gritted underneath Beezus' feet as she measured rice and boiled water according to the directions on the package. When the rice was cooking, she slipped into the dining room to set the table, and then remembered they had forgotten salad. Salad! Carrot sticks were quickest. Beezus began to scrape carrots into the sink. "Yipe!" yelled Ramona from the counter. "The rice!" The lid of the pan was chittering. Beezus snatched a larger pan from the cupboard and transferred the rice. "Do you girls need any help?" Mrs. Quimby called from the living room. "No," answered her daughters. Another calamity. The cornbread should bake at 400 degrees, a higher temperature than that needed for the chicken. What was Ramona to do? "Stick it in the oven anyway." Beezus' face was flushed. In went the cornbread beside the chicken. "Dessert!" whispered Beezus. All she could find was a can of boring pear halves. Back to the cookbook. "Heat with a little butter and serve with jelly in each half," she read. Jelly. Half a jar of apricot jam would have to do. The pears and butter went into the saucepan. Never mind the syrup spilled on the floor. "Beezus!" Ramona held up the package of peas. Beezus groaned. Out came the partially cooked chicken, while she stirred the thawing peas into the yogurt and shoved the dish back into the oven. The rice! They had forgotten the rice, which was only beginning to stick to the pan. "Quick! Take it off the burner!" How did their mother manage to get everything cooked at the right time? Put the carrot sticks on a dish. Pour the milk. "Candles!" Beezus whispered. "Dinner might look better if we have candles." Ramona found 2 candle holders and 2 partly melted candles of uneven length. Beezus struck the match to light them, because although Ramona was brave about touching raw meat, she was skittish about lighting matches. Was the chicken done? The girls anxiously examined their main dish, bubbling and brown around the edges. Beezus stabbed a thigh with a fork, and when it did not bleed, she decided it must be done. A toothpick pricked into the cornbread came out clean. The cornbread was done. Flat, but done. Grit, 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 sounded the girls' feet. It was amazing how a tiny bit of spilled cereal could make the entire kitchen floor gritty. At last, their dinner was served. The dining room light turned off. Dinner announced, and the cooks, tense with anxiety that was hidden by candlelight, fell into their chairs as their parents seated themselves. Was this dinner going to be edible? "Candles!" exclaimed Mrs. Quimby. "What a festive meal!" "Let's taste it before we decide," said Mr. Quimby, with his most wicked grin. The girls watched anxiously as their father took his first bite of chicken. He chewed thoughtfully and said with more surprise than necessary, "Why, this is good. It really is," agreed Mrs. Quimby, and took a bit of cornbread. "Very good, Ramona," she said. Mr. Quimby tasted the cornbread. "Just like grandmother used to make," he pronounced. The girls exchanged suppressed smiles. They could not taste the banana yogurt, and by candlelight no one could tell that the cornbread was a little pale. The chicken, Ramona decided, was not as good as her parents thought, or pretended to think, but she could eat it without gagging. Everyone relaxed, and Mrs. Quimby said chili powder was more interesting than paprika, and asked which recipe they used for the chicken. Ramona answered, "Our own," as she exchanged another look with Beezus. Paprika! Those little specks in the sauce should have been paprika. "We wanted to be creative," said Beezus. Conversation was more comfortable than it had been the previous evening. Mr. Quimby said he was finally satisfied with his drawing, which looked like a real foot. Beezus said her cooking class was studying the food groups everyone should eat every day. Ramona said there was this boy at school who called her Egghead. Mr. Quimby explained that Egghead was slang for a very smart person. The meal was a success. If the chicken did not taste as good as the girls had hoped, and the cornbread did not rise like their mother's, both were edible. Beezus and Ramona were silently grateful to their parents for enjoying, or pretending to enjoy, their cooking. The whole family cheered up. When they had finished their pears with apricot jam, Ramona gave her mother a shy smile. Mrs. Quimby smiled back and patted Ramona's hand. Ramona felt much lighter. "You cooks have worked so hard," said Mr. Quimby, "that I'm going to wash the dishes. I'll even finish clearing the table." "I'll help," volunteered Mrs. Quimby. The girls exchanged another secret smile as they excused themselves and skipped off to their rooms before their parents discovered the pile of chicken skins and the broken eggshell on the counter, the carrot scrapings in the sink, and the cereal, flour, and pear syrup on the floor. "Your turn. Picky eaters,"